Hello everyone and welcome back to Fly From Home. Catman here again with another Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft review. Now I know it's been quite a while since you last heard from us. Unfortunately real life has been getting in the way of playing video games, the eternal issue as always getting in the way of having fun. But hey, we're back again and I've just got a quick review for you today with this nice little cheap and cheerful Marchetti S.205 by Nemeth Designs. Now this is 16 Great British Pounds on the Microsoft Marketplace, around $20, so it's really nice and cheap. And by the looks of things, it's essentially an Italian Piper Arrow. So I thought, given that I've got quite a bit of experience with the Piper Arrow, it might be quite interesting to have a look at this little thing. Now, I'm not going to go spend ages in the hangar like I usually do with the full in-depth reviews, because this is a cheap and cheerful little aeroplane, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. There's plenty of liveries for this aircraft, though. They're really quite nice. There's some Italian Air Force ones as well. This aircraft in real life, or a modified version of it, was actually used by the Italian Air Force. There's an initial ab initio trainer, a glider tower, all sorts of different stuff they used it for. And there's an Italian Air Force livery and all sorts of other things in there. I really like this one because it's really appropriate for an airborne pizza delivery device. So we're going to be delivering some airborne takeaway today. We're actually on the ground here at Brindisi Airport, which is a combined military and international airport in real life. It's, believe it or not far from where my dad comes from. In southern Italy, so I've actually got a little bit of personal connection to this place. In real life, I spent quite a lot of my childhood on holiday in the summer holidays out here in southern Italy, so I thought it might be fun and appropriate to have a little fly around the coast on the east coast of southern Italy while I show you this aeroplane. So, a little bit of a look around the outside of it. The textures are actually really quite nice. There's some weathering around the parts, so you always get weathering on light aircraft in real life, the panel gaps and things like that, where dirt and oil and grime kind of gathers, and then when the aircraft flies through a cloud or it rains or something, the water kind of runs through there and results in these smears. So they've done a good job with that, and little bits of the lacquer's kind of peeled off there, which is quite nice, missing a little bit of paint there. So a nice little bit of weathering, certainly on the cowling and the fuselage. You can see there's a little bit of weathering on there. It's not the absolute best texture I've ever seen in Microsoft Flight Sim, but hey, it's 16 quid, so what do you expect? The landing gear is very nice. The wings seem a little bit overly clean, almost like they kind of gave up when they did the wings. The lights I really don't like. I think they look very FS 2002, so not a huge fan of those. The lighting effects are not particularly good either. Spoiler alert, when I fire up the aeroplane, it's not going to look amazing. Landing like there doesn't look too bad, but again, when it's on, not amazing. The prop as well is this kind of very high gloss kind of finish, and I've never seen an aeroplane in real life with a super high gloss propeller. It's almost always matte or sort of it's like a satin finish on the prop, so not sure if that's really supposed to be like that, but for the most part the aeroplane looks good on the outside. Certainly what you could expect for something on this price point. Inside we've got a pretty basic cockpit, very similar to something that you might expect in a Piper Arrow. I'm going to keep referencing this a lot. We've got a couple of radios here, so we've got a common nav stack on the Garmin 430. We also have an old-fashioned common nav stack up here. Got a pretty old-fashioned mode Charlie transponder, which for some reason is turned on, so we'll turn that off, and a audio panel, which is down here. Got a little autopilot here, and also a DME. Got plunger type controls, pretty similar to what you'd see on a Cessna, and a nice, very stylish little yoke with the Marchetti logo on it here, which is very cool. Little toggle switches for all your lights, battery and alternator. The starter is a toggle, which is pretty cool. Carb heat, this has got the same, well, a very similar engine to the Piper Arrow. Develops the same amount of horsepower, but it's the O360 rather than IO360 Lycoming engine. So it's a 4-cylinder opposed engine with about 200 brake horsepower, but it's the carburetted version, so unfortunately we don't have the advantage of fuel injection. We do have retractable landing gear and electrical flaps, and the landing gear is also electrical, which is very quirky, I guess. Electric landing gear, for those of you not not initiated into the world of light aircraft, electric landing gear is fairly rare, mostly because when you have a big electric motor winding your landing gear up and down, it can be quite difficult, once that motor fails, to then manually raise or lower the landing gear. And in this aeroplane we have this little lever here, which can be used to disconnect the landing gear motor and then wind the landing gear manually up or down, and that does actually work in this airplane, which is pretty cool. Electric flaps is fairly rare on a low wing aircraft. You see this big flap lever down here, you think, oh, it's just manual flaps, same as on a Piper, but actually we have electric flaps on this aircraft, which is pretty advanced, pretty high tech, but they come with their own issues, which I'm not going to get into now, because it's going to be far too boring. Instrument-wise, we've just got the standard 6-pack, although they're in a slightly odd order. So you've got the attitude indicator with the airspeed on the right. That would be the other way around in most cockpits. Again, altimeter would usually be up here, not down there. DI is all the way around here. So quite a strange cockpit layout, which those crazy Italians doing crazy Italian things. I'm allowed to say that, I'm half Italian. Landing gear lights, indicator lights, we only have one for up, one for down, so no 3 greens, just one on this aircraft. Not uncommon, really. Engine gauges are all over this side. With suction, we've got a spare attitude indicator, and then we've got RPM, manifold, and fuel flow over there. Oh, yes, and throttle, big white knob, mixture, the funny looking red one, and prop there. They're the wrong way round from most aircraft. Those would be swapped over. We've got a cabin heater, there's a plunger down there, and ADF all the way down there. Fuel selector, so it draws from one tank at a time, very similar to, hey, an Arrow. The fuel selector is over here, so that's right tank, that's left tank, and then you can wind it around another setting to turn it off. So let's leave it on left tank for start. We've got 50% fuel, as is the Microsoft Flight Simulator default, so we'll leave it on that. Now, thankfully, they have included an in-game checklist with this aircraft, which is very handy because I had a poke around online and I was completely unable to find a real-world checklist for this thing for free. So that's very, very handy, because that was... Usually I have a real-world checklist on an iPad at the side of me, and I'll run through that, but today we're just going to be going through this. So this is a pre-flight inspection where you check your electrics and do the pre-flight walk-around. It's fine, we'll assume that that's already done. So we'll start with the pre-start. So battery can come on, like that. There's no sound for that battery switch for some reason. Oh, no, there is. It's just me being an idiot. There is a sound for that, so ignore me. We'll tick that. Fuel selector left to right, run the left tank. Propeller lever is max RPM, set checks. Mixture can set to full rich. Throttle is minimum, so yes, throttle is at idle. Carburetor heat is in the off position, which presumably is out here. So the control scheme on this aeroplane, on the plungers anyway, is in for on, out for off. Battery is on, so... Okay, slightly strange, got that twice. Generator, so that's the alternator. Click that at the same time as I did the battery. Beacon lights, so pop that on the honeycomb yoke, but you can see the little switch goes there. Booster pump, so pop that on there, you can hear that working. Engine prime, now normally I'd expect a primer, a plunger primer, on a non-carburetted aeroplane, or at least a little electric button to prime it with. As far as I can tell, there isn't one, but with the fuel pump on and the mixture up, if you look at the fuel flow here, I can push the throttle forward and achieve a bit of fuel flow, so we'll say that that's priming. Please forgive me if that's not the official way to do this. Just make sure that the mags aren't on. Just yet, anyway. Throttle opens slightly, so we'll crack it just a little bit, and then we're going to crank the starter, so actually we've got to put those back on. Open this little guy here, and there we go, engine start. Yeah, mags are on both, that's all good. Oil pressure, so normal after start check, so starter warning light, wherever that is presumably out. Oil pressure is in the green. Booster pump can now come off. Engine RPM check, so it says check RPM. Now, apparently at the moment we're doing 2,000 RPM, which is absurdly high. I've actually got the throttle all the way at idle, you can see it there. Won't come out any further than this. And apparently, oh, never mind, it's going down a little bit, look at that. Okay, but still, 1700 RPM is absurdly high. Normally I'd expect it to be idling somewhere between 500 and 700 RPM. Now if I pull the prop lever all the way back, I can get it down to just over 1000, which is normally the ground idle for this sort of engine. So as far as I can tell, that's a bug. Now please excuse me if the real aeroplane does idle at 2000 RPM or 1700 RPM, but I think I'm pretty much certain it's not supposed to do that, so that's pretty absurd really. But anyway, we'll check that. Oil temperature, so we've got some oil temp, we're all good. Nav lights can come on. Now the chapter checklist, taxi clearance, so obviously we'd talk on the radio, but we're not going to bother with that. Aircraft position, so we're going to watch out for Mr. Cool Dude here and not turn him into cat food with the propeller. Throttle lever set minimum, and then we're going to go. So runway 05 is in use, which helpfully is the one right behind us right now on the taxiway. So we're just going to taxi out there and take off from that. And let's go. So release parking brake. A little bit of throttle to get her rolling. Peace out, mate. Watch the wing. And off we go. Hey. So, I don't know if they use the new Microsoft Flight Simulator propeller model on this airplane. It's only been recently released, but it does seem to roll pretty well without any use of added throttle. Right, normally obviously we'd do the power checks and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to bore you by going through all that kind of thing. We'll just do our lineup checks. So, approach path is clear. Right, clear left, transponder can go to mode Charlie. Pitot heat, I've got a switch for that, so I'll pop that on. And all the lights can now come on. We're to take off with no flap. Fuel pump can come on as well. And let's go. I'm going to put the prop forward now, so you can hear the RPM coming up. Again, that's not something that you would see in real life. You can't control the propeller RPM with so little forward airspeed and so little RPM. Using the prop control. And go and watch my extremely exciting video on constant speed propellers if you want to know the exact reason behind that. I do go into it a little bit. Now there are no speeds in the checklist, so I'm just going to use the ones from the arrow. So I'm going to hold it on the brakes, which I'm really struggling to do, as you can see. And this is full idle throttle, and I'm going to select full power. Airspeed alive, 40 knots. 60, 65, T's and P's still green. Gentle bit of back pressure. Off the ground she comes. Climb initially at 90. And insufficient run remaining. Touch the brakes. Gear select up. Near that electric motor cranking the gear up. Away we go. So we can see we're getting about 1,000 feet per minute, just under that, which is pretty arrow-ish. Arrow 3 maybe. 2 doesn't climb quite as nicely. And look out to the right. We're going to make a right turn, start heading southbound. Update the heading bug. About 1330 should do it. And maintaining 100 knots for a nice cruise climb. I'm going to bring the power back to 25 inches manifold pressure. Now, normally I would also bring the prop back to 25 inches manifold pressure, but I literally can't. The prop, 2500 RPM, sorry, not manifold pressure. But this is full back on the prop, full course, and it's giving me a couple of hundred, well, less than 100 RPMs worth of adjustments on that. So again, pretty certain that's a bug, it's just not working like it should do. Now you may have noticed we've got a little 430 here, which you might expect is the Microsoft Flight Simulator default Garmin 430. But as far as I can tell, it's just there for scenery because I can't change any of the settings on here at all. Can't change comms or navs or anything. So not a great deal of functionality from that. Let's go up to 3,000 feet. It's a fairly sensible cruise altitude. There's a few clouds about today, but we'll we'll dodge them. I am using real-world weather at the moment. It's reasonably nice weather in the south of Italy today, as it often is. It's a much more pleasant part of the world than the UK, that's for sure, at least in terms of weather. Fair bit of right rudder required, by the way, on takeoff, which is what you'd expect. I'm going to bring the power right back just to get us a more reasonable sort of cruise RPM. It's a little bit bumpy. That's not me, by the way, doing the wiggly on the attitude. That's actually just bumps from the Microsoft Flight Simulator weather system, which is fairly realistic. It expects you get a fair few bumps off of rising thermals on a day like this. Right, let's put the autopilot on. We've got heading and altitude hold mode there, which is pretty handy. It seems to work pretty nicely. It's probably just the default Microsoft Flight Simulator autopilot system, but it works well enough. And here we are. So, after takeoff checks, let's run through those. So, fuel pump can come off, landing light can come off, engine T's and P's are all good, the aircraft's trimmed out for the cruise. I'm going to give it a little bit more throttle, because we're only doing about 110 knots here, which isn't stellar. Okay, so autopilot works pretty nicely as far as I can tell. Follows the heading bug. I'm just twisting that round on my Bravo throttle quadrant, so you can see that's following the heading bug. As far as I can tell, there's no nav mode. It's just a heading hold and altitude hold. So very basic autopilot. But what more do you want on a light aircraft? I mean, shouldn't really expect full 3-axis approach linked sort of thing on an aircraft like this. It's mostly for hand flying anyway. I just kind of overshot the bug there a little bit. Now, from what I read from the blurb on the Nemeth website, this aircraft has a fairly high-tech construction based on honeycomb panels inside the wings, which require very, very little riveting. So the wings are a very, very clean design compared to, for example, an Arrow, and therefore it's quite low drag. So although we've got the same horsepower as an Arrow, we can actually expect a higher cruise speed. So if I bump us up to 22 inches of manifold pressure here, we'll see what kind of cruise speed we can get out of it. I was doing about 150 knots earlier, indicated, but then it was overstressing the airframe and killing me, so I think that might be a little bit overly quick, certainly for slightly rough air. So we'll see if we can get 140 out of it. Now, I don't know if that's, again, I don't know if that's a bug or if the wings are supposed to come off at 150 knots, in which case I doff my cap to you, Nemeth Designs. Something that kind of annoys me about this aeroplane is the animation of the propeller, this kind of strobing effect that you've got. I don't think it's particularly good. Now, if you've only ever seen videos of what being inside a single-engine aeroplane looks like, you probably think that that's exactly what it looks like in real life, but it's not. That's just an effect caused by a camera. If you were actually looking at this in real life, all you would see is sort of a faint disc, maybe a little bit of sort of interference, but nothing kind of like this. So propeller animation is not particularly amazing. Sounds okay. I mean, around the sides, outside, they're pretty good. If you go in front, they kind of go very muffled, which I'm not a huge fan of. Let's see what the aircraft looks like in flight. See these very very smooth wings, which are presumably where it gets all of its performance from. The lights, as you can see, like I mentioned, really quite poor. They don't look very good at all. One of the quite strange things I think about this aeroplane is that they've gone to such a huge effort to keep it as clean and smooth as possible, and then they've only gone for partially retracting gear. The main gear sticks quite proud out of the wing, and the nose gear only retracts sort of halfway. There's no gear doors like there are in an Arrow, so I'd imagine they've given away quite a lot of the gains that they had with this nice Nice, slim, efficient wing. But never mind. I suppose we should crack on with some general handling, so I'll pop the autopilot off now. And we're going to slow down a touch, we'll go for about 120 knots. I haven't bothered leaning the aircraft out. 3,000 feet is not really high enough for you to gain a great deal of advantage from that, so I'm not really going to bother. Leave the prop where it is, which is as low as it will go. Again, not exactly what I'd be doing in real life, I'm pretty sure, but never mind. A little bit of up trim. I'm going to go for a steep turn to the left, so bank, balance, and back pressure. Okay, not a great deal of back pressure required for this aircraft. Quite different to the Arrow, which is really manual, really hard work in a steep turn. Really, got to pull back on the yoke quite a lot. It's a very heavy aeroplane. Of course, represented extremely well by the Just Flight Arrow when I reviewed that aircraft. It handled pretty much perfectly. This is quite a well-behaved little aeroplane, though. Quite different to the Arrow. It's quite light on the controls. Trying to keep it around 3-4. I'm doing quite a bad job of maintaining my altitude right now. And kick it out with a bit of opposite rudder. There we go, bank balance, back pressure. And recenter the control. So yeah, quite well behaved in a steep turn, really. I'm not sure if that's accurate to real life, but I mean, if it's a more efficient wing, then generally it's more easy to maintain altitude in a steep turn. Whereas the Arrow is quite a thick, stubby little wing, so that's possibly how this aircraft would behave in real life. Just to do some quick little checks. So I'm just going to apply a bit of rudder and see if we can get into a spiral descent. And you can see, yeah, it is doing that. So you can see the spiral descent setting up there. If I just leave the aircraft in a bit of a roll and let go of all the controls, we should sort of set up into a spiral descent as well. It is a little bit. You'd expect the angle of roll to be increasing a little bit more than this. That's about right, really. It does have a little bit of that kind of almost fly-by-wire type feel to it. Like you set a angle of bank and it just maintains it. And you wouldn't really expect that in a real light aircraft. Like I said, if you set an angle of bank, put the aircraft into a roll and let go of everything, then a spiral descent eventually develops. Which is not really what I'm seeing here. Okay, let's do a quick Hazel check. So height sufficient, airframe is set to the clean. Safety and security is good. Engine, we'll put the fuel pump on. We'll also change tanks. Try not to turn it off. There we go. That's fun. I was just doing that with a scroll wheel. Maybe I should have just tried clicking it. Hatches and harnesses all secured. Location, well, we're over the sea, so we're clear of active airfields, built areas, controlled airspace and danger zones, and lookout turn we're just doing. Obviously, we're kind of in a little bit of cloud here, which is not ideal, but hey-ho, we're in a flight simulator. In real life, we'd never be doing this sort of maneuver around that. I'm going to give it max RPM on the prop and then just reduce the throttle to idle. Now, apparently, I'm going to have to keep the prop back to minimum again. Otherwise, it's never going to stall, I don't think. Quick blast of carb heat as we're slowing down, and then turn it back off again for the recovery. You can see the landing gear warning there flashing because we've got idle throttle selected and the gear up. There's the stall warner. Whee! Okay, that's an interesting stall. That's like a partial spin. Okay, let's reclimb a little bit and try that again, see if it does the same thing again. Again, no real-world knowledge of this aeroplane, so it may have really quite violent stall tendencies in real life. Sometimes aircraft with quite slim high-performance wings do have very violent stall characteristics, so I'm not going to comment too much on that, but oh, it's gone the other way this time, okay. So quite aggressive characteristics there for a little light aircraft like this. Perhaps a little too aggressive, but again, I'm not going to make a 100% judgment given that I've got no real-world experience in this aeroplane. Okay, let's set back up in that sort of 22 inches, sorry, manifold pressure cruise, which gave us about 140 knots. Retrim. Lost about 500 feet of altitude, so we'll just reclimb to 3,000 if we can. And we'll pop back to Brindisi and we'll fly a couple circuits maybe. Another cloud, very bad VFR technique. Keep skirting through these clouds. But as with any teacher, the golden rule is do what I say, not what I do. Just about to see the runway lights of Brindisi down there. All the nice little port towns in southern Italy. Southern Italy, not a massively common holiday destination for anyone of you thinking of visiting Italy, mostly because there's not an awful lot to see. There's a lot of olive trees. The little coastal towns are lovely though, and there's a lot of history, a lot of forts and things like that down here. Southern Italy was actually invaded by the Moors, I believe, in the sort of 1500s, I'm going to say. Please don't quote me on that. So there's a lot of history from back then, during that period. So yeah, stick to the coast, and you'll be happy. Going into the interior, and it's mostly olive trees. Okay, let's update the heading bug. Pop the autopilot back on to maintain heading and altitude. Grab hold of the navigramp charts quickly. Okay, you can see we're basically coming down the low altitude airway here towards Brindisi. There's actually a VOR here, so maybe I should tune that up. The Casale 113.55, so let's see if we can pick that up. It's a comm radio, so we probably won't be picking it up on that. There we go. Hear the world's quietest ident there. Happy days. Can't actually change this volume knob at all, which is interesting. Now, I'm not really sure which instrument this is supposed to be outputting to. Presumably this one, but well, that's annoying. Never mind. Yeah, so as far as I can tell, the nav radio isn't actually outputting onto here. I mean, it is according to this, it's in GPS mode, but obviously the CDI button here isn't working, so I can't put it into VLOC mode. So, again, not sure if bug. Given that this is quite a recent release to Microsoft Flight Simulator, I suppose you could forgive some of the bugs, I guess, plus with the price, but I mean, it's getting a little annoying, not gonna lie. Get rid of the map because we can clearly see the runway here. Runway 05 is this one, so I'm not sure if it's the left or a right-hand circuit, but I'll presume it's a left-hand. So we'll do a dead side descent. I'll pop the autopilot off now. Start bringing the power back. Okay, so 109 knots is our gear limiting speed. Oh, we're actually getting a gear warning horn now. Oh, actually, that's not a gear warning horn. That's the outer marker beacon. So that works. Just fun. Shut up. So I think, yeah, there should definitely be more functionality around this OBI here. Unless there's something that I'm not getting, in which case I do deeply apologise. The fuel pump is still on, so we'll do our pre-joining checks. Radios presumably are all set up, navs and comms. Engine T's and P's green, mixture's full rich. Aerodrome Q&H would be set, but I'm just going to press B because I'm a lazy sod. And DI, so we would line the DI up, but presumably because there's not a... how does this work? Maybe this works. Let's see. Ah, there we go. So these are presumably nav and com too. These are actually outputting to this instrument, not this one. This one's supposed to link up with the 430, but the 430 doesn't work, so... hey-ho. So I'm just descending dead side right now. Interesting approach, this one, over the port. I've done this a few times. Not flying myself, unfortunately, but as the passenger in a 737 usually. Don't know if it still is, but it used to be part of the Ryanair route network, so... In fact, the first couple times I came out here, it was a 737-200 that took us out here, so that shows you just how incredibly ancient I am. SIAI, is that Swissair? A320 down there? Trying to avoid screwing up his departure. Although I'm not really sure why he's just sat on the runway at that intersection. I have got live traffic and live players on, so it might just be somebody having a little bit of a crisis. Right, we're on quite a tight downwind here, so let's crack on with the checks. Brakes pressurised, undercarriage speed below 10, is it 109? 109, yeah. Gear select down. Now we don't have a white arc, and I can't see any placard, so I don't know what flap limiting is, but I'm guessing it's around about 100 knots or so. Mixture's full rich, mags are on both. Fuel's on, sufficient flaps. Okay, let's deploy a stage. Instruments are all good, carpeets we'll put on. Hatches and harnesses secure, and lights. Let's put all the landing lights on. Watch the speed, getting a little slow now. Start turning base. And descending, probably should be aiming for about 90 knots. I'm a bit slow here. This may end up being a bit of a military circuit with a continuous turn onto final. In fact, yes, it is going to be one of those. I'm going to go full flap now. Quite barn door-y flaps, they hang almost straight down. So we're getting quite a high rate of descent with gear and flap out, which is quite like an arrow. Okay, reds, blues and greens. In fact, I'm going to keep the blues back because I think at max RPM we're just not going to be able to land and it's just going to float forever. Okay, with the numbers at 65 or so. Just going to idle it. A little bit of crosswinds. And floaty, 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 floaty. And down we go, that's close enough. Right, I'm going to put crop max RPM now and full power. carb heat comes off. Probably should have done that at 300 feet, but never mind. Rotate. Positive climb. Insufficient runway remaining. Touch the brakes, gear up. Okay, level off and downwinds at 1,000 feet here, go for about 18 inches manifold pressure. Yeah, really slippy aeroplane. It's finding it quite hard to keep the speed under control actually. Let's bring it back a bit more. Go for a flapless approach to land. Might be quite interesting given that I think it's quite a slippy little aeroplane, so it might be quite hard to slow it down. So brakes, speed below 109, not quite. Let's just try and get the speed there. There we go. Gear select down. Undercarriage, mixture mags. Both on full and both. Fuel's on, sufficient. Flaps. Let's have a stay. Oh, actually. What am I saying? Flaps, not at all, because we're doing a flapless approach. Instruments are all in the green. Carb heat on. Hatches and harnesses secure. Landing lights on. Let's go for base. See the city of Otranto down there. Not Otranto, sorry, Brindisi. I'm getting quite aggressive with closing the throttle here because I suspect we're going to struggle to get the speed on, but we'll see. Oh, a little bit late on that turn, I think. Never mind. Watch the airspeed. Don't be tempted to drag it around. Really tight. Place to final turn. It's where a lot of accidents happen in light aircraft. It's not too bad actually. It's kind of on the glide and about 90 knots, which is maybe a touch fast for what you want, but it's in the ballpark. Keep the power off. Now, at this point, I'd be doing reds, blues, and greens, so mixture full rich, prop full forward, and 3 green lights. We've only got 1 green light, obviously, and I'm going to leave the prop back because, as I mentioned before, I'm pretty sure it's a bug, and we aren't going to be able to land if the prop is spinning its arse off at 1700 RPM. I am going to remember the carb heat this time, just in case of a low altitude go around. It is getting a little bit floaty now, struggling to get the aircraft down. This might be interesting. Let's go for a bit of a side slip. That's got it under control. Bit of crosswind by the looks of things. It's okay. Oh, very floaty. I'm going to struggle to get it to land before halfway down the runway, I think, at this point. Still floating. Are you kidding me? There we go. Okay, runway vacated, landing and strobes can go off, transponder goes to standby, pitot heater can come off, flaps are already up, trim, I'm guessing, is fairly neutral. I'm going to keep the prop back here so we can actually have a fairly normal RPM on the taxi in. And then we'll park up and I'll have a little bit of a talk through the pros and cons of this aeroplane. Okay, quick rundown here. I'm not going to keep you all day because I don't think there's a great deal to say about this aeroplane. It's pretty cheap and cheerful. It's nice to fly. It feels pretty good, although I don't think it's the most realistic thing I've ever felt in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It certainly isn't up to the level of some of the Just Flight aircraft or the Carenado aircraft. I think they do fly an awful lot better. Certainly the more recent Carenados are very, very nice flying aeroplanes, and they do a really great job of replicating what a real aeroplane is like to fly. This is a little bit too point and shoot kind of thing. It kind of just goes where you point it, which is not really what light aircraft do. That said, steep turn's pretty nice. Stall is kind of violent. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the stall is too violent for an aircraft like this, but I would happily be stand corrected if somebody in the comments has flown one of these and can tell me just what it's like. The way it looks is good. It's got nice textures. It's not the most amazing aeroplane I've ever seen in this sim, but it's certainly not the worst, and there's a little bit of weathering on there, which I always like to see. Things like the rotating beacon. This little shield on the beacon actually spins round, which is really, really quite cool. It's almost like the PMDG DC6, and the bit of distortion you see through the glass of the beacon light on here is really good. So in places, very, very good. In other places, things like the lights here and bits of the wings and things like that, not amazing. Inside, it's an interesting noise. Inside, the textures are pretty nice, pretty good. The seats are good. Overall overhead stuff, the panel is quite nice. So overall looks are pretty good, certainly good enough for an aeroplane that's only £16. Functionality in terms of instrumentation and stuff, not great. I mean, if I had a working 430, that would make a huge difference. Nav and comm radios are okay, I guess, but you can't change the volumes or turn them off or anything like that, so not amazing. Autopilot, I appreciate they've made a little custom autopilot panel here, and it does work pretty nicely actually. DME is pretty good, but again, the 430 not working means that this entire instrument, which is your primary navigational instrument, just doesn't work at all. Chronometer's pretty cool though. Other stuff works as far as I can tell. But then the big thing for me is the RPM issue. So having to fly constantly with the RPM at minimum is really, really strange, and I'm pretty certain is nothing like what you have to do with the real aircraft. Now with the RPM set anywhere near where you'd have it in real life, it kind of shoots up to 3,000 RPM in the cruise, which is kind of mad. It's more like a Spitfire cruise RPM setting than an aircraft with an O360 fitted. So I think that's probably a bug, and you know, again, as time goes on, it may be able to fix it. There's a lot of changes going on in Microsoft Flight Simulator right now in terms of propeller physics and aerodynamics and all sorts of things. So it may be just that this is an interim stopgap measure, and as all those things are introduced, they're going to add updates and improve things, and it's going to get better and better as time goes on. But don't quote me on that, because I have no idea what's going through the developer's head. It may just be quick cash grab and move on to the next project. But I certainly hope that's not the case. But do I think this is worth 16 of the Queen's pounds, $20 right now in its current state? Probably not. I mean, it's not really any better than the default aeroplanes, to be perfectly honest. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's worse. It is an interesting, quirky little aeroplane. It's a very pretty little aeroplane. It comes with some great colour schemes. But, I mean, if you're flying A to B and you want to do maybe a little bit of flight training, maybe follow a route you've done in real life, or you want to get into flying light aircraft in a simulator, the defaults are going to do you much better than this will, and the defaults just come with the game. So, yeah, it's a no from me right now, but I would be happy to retract that statement if further updates come in which sort all of these issues out and add a little bit more functionality and make it more worth the cost. But that's just what I think. Please comment below with what you think. Even if you think I'm a complete idiot, I'm happy to hear those sorts of things. In fact, I believe I'm a complete idiot, so you're just confirming what I already know myself. But please, if you did enjoy, give us a like, give us the old thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Thank you, and bye-bye.